This story takes place in Durango, Colorado, 3 years ago. Now there was a father and a mother and a 17-year-old girl who lived in Durango. The mother was a veterinarian, or is a veterinarian, and the father just worked in the area. Now the girl, there was something incredible about this girl. And what it was her hair. She had the most incredible orange red hair, but it wasn't red, it was an orange red, and it was absolutely beautiful. Most people don't like red hair. Most people who have red hair don't like red hair, but she had beautiful, beautiful, especially when the sun caught it. It would look just red-orange, and it was really, really beautiful. And she was in high school, and the family had a cabin back in the mountains, of the San Juan Mountains, are there in Durango. And to get to the cabin, you had to take the narrow gauge railroad between Durango and Silverton. And this is true. This is what this railroad does. It's a small, narrow gauge means that it's smaller than a regular train. The wheels are closer together than a regular train. And you take it, and the train stops in the middle of the wilderness, and you can get off and go hiking and stuff. Well, in the summer, one of the ways they could get to the cabin was to take the narrow gauge railroad and get off and backpack into the cabin. In the winter, they had to use a different way, because the narrow gauge railroad doesn't run in the winter, and they had to use a different way. And there was a ranger station at the end of a road, and they could go to this ranger station, and then they could access the cabin from that point. Well, they spent a lot of weekends in the cabin all during the summer. It was absolutely beautiful. It was very, very remote, and it was just a one-room cabin, and had a little spring running in front of it of water, and it was at the head of a valley set in a big stand of pine trees, where the pine trees came down off the mountains into the valley, and this cabin was right set there. And during the late fall, about 3 years ago, the mother, who was a veterinarian, was told that she had a conference in Chicago in the middle of December that she had to go to. And the girl's high school vacation started just a little bit before the mom was going on that trip. And then the mom was going for 4 or 5 days and then going to come back. And so the dad proposed to the girl, the daughter, that they go in to the cabin while the mom was in Chicago, that they ski into the cabin while the mom was in Chicago, and spend a few days in their cabin. And the girl thought that was really a great idea. She would be on vacation, and they were really good cross-country skiers, and they were really good telemark skiers. Does anybody know what telemark skiing is? Hands? Liz?
It's not downhill skiing. It's you have kind of cross-country skis, but you're downhill skiing with those skis. So you have to have a lot of weight, a lot of muscle and strength in your legs, because when you turn, it's not going to be a slide gliding motion like a snowboard or a ski. Your foot actually comes out of the clip on the ski. I don't know.
It's a 3-pin boot, which has 3 pins sticking up out of the ski into the front of your boot. And it's a turn that's an old-fashioned turn, but it really is terrific, because if you carry a pack and you go into the backcountry, you got to be able to go downhill, because the backcountry isn't flat. You got to be able to go downhill. So a telemark turn is a way of skiing that we did for years. My wife actually was a telemark instructor in Vail, and we did that a lot in Vail and in the backcountry as well. And they were all very, very good telemark skiers and cross-country skiers. So the daughter got really excited about this. So the mom took off for her conference in Chicago, and the father and the daughter packed up their packs and drove their SUV to the ranger station and told the rangers where they were going. And because the ranger station was open in the summer, the ranger station, the guys lived right there, but in the winter they opened for a few hours every day and then closed, because people do ski into the backcountry. So they stopped the ranger station, told them where they were going, parked their car, got their skis on and big packs, and started off. Now the way they had to get to this cabin was they had to go up one long valley, which took most of one day. They had to climb a ridge, pretty high, not a mountain, but a pretty high ridge that was flat on the top, spend the night there, go down into the second valley, and go all day up to the end of the second valley, and that's where the cabin was. So it was a 2-day trip to get in there. So they set off about 10 o'clock in the morning and skied all day and got to the end of the first valley and climbed the ridge. And they, it gets dark early, and this was in December again, it gets dark early, and they set up camp, and they had a tent, and they packed down the snow with their skis and set up a tent, and they had little backpacking stoves and made a little supper, and they had very, very warm sleeping bags. Sleeping bags were good to 20 below zero. And so they wanted to be, generally what you try to do when you're doing that kind of winter camping is you try to get everything done during daylight, all your supper and everything done, and you get into bed because the temperature drops really, really fast when the sun goes down, when it gets dark. And you don't particularly have a campfire. You can have a campfire, but you don't too much on winter camping. They got into bed, and they were kind of talking and sleepy and talking, and all of a sudden, this very strange noise sounded in the forest. And it was sort of like a tea kettle whistling. And I can't do it really well, but it was sort of like a tea kettle. It was sort of like, and then from over here. And the girl said to her father, what is that? What is that noise? And he said, I've never heard anything like that before, ever. And they were in the backcountry. He said it could be an elk, but the elk don't generally sound like that. Maybe it's an elk. Maybe it's a young elk who doesn't really know how to whistle like an elk does. That probably is what it is. And it stopped, and they went to sleep. And the next morning they got up and they made breakfast with their camp stoves, and they had some instant oatmeal and hot chocolate and raisins and stuff like that. They ate all that, packed up their bags and their tent, loaded their packs, and started out. Now, they had to go across the top of the ridge, and then they started down through the trees. And as they started down through the trees, they got about a third of the way down this hill, and all of a sudden, the daughter said, "What is that smell?" And the dad, and this unbelievable smell they encountered, this smell. And it wasn't like anything you could describe. It was just a very unpleasant, maybe like a dead body would smell. I mean, it was a very unpleasant smell. And the dad goes, "Holy cow, what is that?" And the daughter's going, "Dad, what is that?" And they kept skiing down, and the smell stayed with them. And the dad said, the best thing it's a dead animal. It may be a dead elk or a dead deer or something. I never smelled anything like that in my life. And then it went away. And they skied on down to the bottom. It was a beautiful day. And they skied up the length of the valley, and took them all day to get there. And just at dark, they got to their cabin. And the cabin had a metal roof on it, and it had a pretty steep roof. And the snow, there was a lot of snow that winter, and the snow had fallen on the cabin and then slid down the roof, and there was snow all the way up to the edge of the roof on the sides of the cabin. I mean, it was snow everywhere. So and they knew this would be the case, their first job was to kind of shovel snow away from the door. The cabin was a one-room cabin with a little porch on the front and a door on the front. That is, on the long end of the short end of the rectangle, there was a door and a porch, and the roof came out over the porch. And then in the cabin itself were 2 sets of bunk beds toward the back of the rectangle, and a pot-bellied stove for heated with wood, and some cupboards and stuff. And they always left food in there in case anybody hunting or anything in the fall or winter got stuck and they found the cabin, they'd have something to eat. So there was always some food in cans and stuff so mice couldn't get at it. And there was always a good supply in the summer when they left. Whenever they left the cabin, there was always a good supply of wood on the porch for burning in the pot-bellied stove, and a little supply of kindling in the cabin itself. Well, when they opened the door of the cabin, it was colder in the cabin than it was outside. I mean, it was really cold. So they fired up the pot-bellied stove. You know what? Did everybody know what I mean when I say a pot-bellied stove? Okay, sorry about that. That's an old expression. A pot-bellied stove is a round stove in which you build a fire. It's made of iron, and it has a pipe for the smoke that goes up out of it and through either the roof or the ceiling, out through either through the roof or the wall. It goes out, so the smoke goes out. But the reason a pot-bellied stove is really good is that all the metal gets very, very hot when there's a fire inside it, and the metal radiates heat, and so it heats up a room like this cabin amazingly fast. When we've gone into these cabins, when we've been on trips like this, you go in and it takes a little while to get the darn wood burning and everything, but you would be amazed. It is colder inside the cabin than it is out when you go in. They're unbelievably cold when they've just been sitting there. But you heat up the stove, and the pipe radiates heat. The stove itself radiates heat. You can't touch it. It's really, really hot. But you can cook on it and everything else. Okay, that's what a pot-bellied stove is. And so they did that. They fired up the stove, and pretty quick the cabin had a window. It had, on the right side of the front of the cabin was the door, and then there was a window looking out over the porch to the outside, and there was a window on each side of the cabin, and there was an outhouse. It didn't have a bathroom. Everybody know what an outhouse is? Yeah. There was an outhouse, and they had to go shovel out the outhouse. And I'll tell you a little detail about outhouses in the winter, which probably none of you have the faintest idea about, but if you can imagine sitting down on an outhouse in the winter, on a wood, outhouse, it's cold. But you know what you do in the winter, and this is wherever anybody goes winter camping, this is the case. What they do is they put a styrofoam toilet seat made out of styrofoam in the outhouse. And when you sit on it, it gets warm instantly. True, real. In the dead of winter, go into an outhouse, styrofoam seat, it's warm instantly. So that's a cool deal. So anyway, that's just a little detail for you guys on winter camping. So they shoveled out the outhouse, they cooked their supper, and before they went to bed, the daughter said, "Well, Dad, can I do my thing?" And he said, "Did you bring your stuff?" She said, "Yeah." And he said, "Okay, you can do your thing." And she had in her pack, which was really heavy, a big sack of gorp. Do you know what gorp is? No. Okay. Gorp is a mixture of peanuts, raisins, M&Ms, mostly peanuts and nuts, raisins, M&Ms, and stuff like that. And it's high energy, very high energy food. And so when you're hiking or skiing, you take a mouthful of that. We always have a sack of that whenever we're going on a trip, whether it's backpacking or ski packing or whatever. We always have that stuff, and you just eat a mouthful, and it's amazing how much energy it gives you. Well, she brought a big sack of it, way more than they use for the traveling. And she did it because this is what she did at the cabin. Every time they went to the cabin, she, just before they go to bed, summer or winter, she'd go out and leave a little pile of gorp all across the front of the porch. And the next morning, summertime, all the little critters, like chipmunks and stuff, would have come and eaten it. And there'd be little bits of gorp and stuff scattered on the porch, but it'd be all gone. And she said, "Can I do my thing?" And he said, "Well, yeah, there'll probably be some squirrels. There's some squirrels around, and you know, chipmunks, don't know, but there'll probably be some squirrels. Yeah, go do your thing." So she went out and put her row of gorp along the edge of the porch. Came inside, and they had a lantern, so there was light in the cabin. And they get into bed and start to turn the lantern down. And she says, "Dad, did you hear that?" And he said, "Yep." And he left the lantern still going a little bit. And they listened. Out in the forest. And then it stopped. "Dad, could that elk have followed us all the way here?" I don't know. That's really a funny sound. But let's go to bed. Turn the lantern out. The next morning, she wakes up and she goes out, and it has snowed. About 4 inches of snow. Now the porch of the cabin, the roof of the cabin comes out over the porch. Okay, so the porch is, once they shoveled it off, the porch is protected. The snow didn't fall on the porch. She went out and she came back in and she said, "Dad, that's the most amazing thing. Every single bit of gorp is gone. There's not a crumb. There's not nothing left. It's gone. The little critters always chew it up and leave bits of it, but it's gone." And he went out and he looked and he said, "You're right." And then he looked out in front. He said, "Look at that." Now there are about 4 inches of snow across the front where they'd shoveled all the snow away from the front of the cabin. About 4 inches of new snow. But very faintly, they could see where the snow was covering the ground, some areas of the snow that were slightly lower than the rest of the snow. And he said, "It almost looked like tracks under that new snow, but they're awful big. They look like snowshoes." And he thought, "That's weird." But they didn't think much about it. It wasn't really very noticeable. He said, "I may just be seeing things." So I went back inside, and they made breakfast, and they made some, and then they kind of hung around, but they waited for it to warm up a little bit. They had breakfast and hung around. They said, "You want to go do some telemark skiing?" And she said, "Yeah, that'd be cool." So they got their skis, and they put skins on, and they used skins to climb the steep ridge. Does anybody know what skins on cross-country skis are? Anybody know about that? Let me explain it to you. When you're climbing a hill on skis, the tendency is for the ski to slide back, right? If you're going up a hill, you move the ski forward and it wants to slide back, right? Well, the way you counteract that, and they used to do it with animal skins. Seal skins actually work really, really well for this, because what they do is they make a skin, which either from an animal skin, now it's artificial, that's exactly the width of the ski and the length of the ski, and it straps onto the ski, and the hair is they work it so the hair is pointing backwards, back to the back of the ski. So if you get the picture, when you slide the ski forward, the hair is going with the ski, but if the ski starts to slid back, the hair all fluffs out and grabs the snow and it won't let the ski go back. That's what skins are. Now they're artificial. Same principle. They make them artificial. They don't use actual animal skins. So what you can do is you go up a hill, you take a step, and the ski comes back just a little bit, and you take another step, and that's how you climb a hill. And that's how they climbed the big ridge to camp when they came in, and that's how they climbed the hill to go telemarking. So what you do is you climb the hill with the skins, and then you ski down the hill. And then you put the skins in a little small backpack, and then you put them back on the skis, climb up the hill again, take them off, and ski down with the skis being really slippery. So there was a place near the cabin where they went up in the forest where there was an open kind of an area, and they had a great time skiing, just a great time. And telemark skiing is the most fun kind of skiing. It's just really wonderful, especially if you're in a lot of deep snow. It's really wonderful. And nothing really happened. I mean, they had a great day and came back, and the only thing that the girl, this daughter, thought she heard one time way, way far away in the forest, she thought she heard a sound like this. And her dad didn't hear it. And she wasn't really sure that she heard it. But it was kind of a funny sound. And anyway, so she didn't think too much about it because there's a lot, you know, there's no bears out at that time of the year. They're hibernating, but who knows? And so they went back to the cabin and they spent the night. Cooked supper, had a great supper. She put out her gorp. They got ready to go to bed, and they heard the tea kettle again. And this time the tea kettle was from over here. And they thought there might have been a tea kettle out there. And then it stopped. They turned off the light. Dad wasn't particularly concerned about it. It was really a funny sound. But it might have been some weird bird or something. But they went to bed. About 2 o'clock in the morning, the dad woke up and he said, Did you hear that? Did you hear that? He said in a whisper to his daughter. She said, yeah. She said, I thought I heard that when we were skiing this afternoon. Very quiet voice. But it was closer to the cabin. And so the dad very, very quietly got out of his sleeping bag and very, very quietly snuck over to the window and looked out the window. And he stayed there for about 5 minutes. And his daughter said, did you see anything? Do you see anything? And he said, no, I thought I might have seen a shadow under the trees way out at the far end of the clearing where we cleared, just at the edge of the trees there. I thought I might have seen something, but no, let's go back to bed. So they went back to bed. The next morning, all the gorp is gone. I mean, gone. And they had tracked up the snow enough, going out and getting water from the spring. They had to cut a hole in the ice of the spring with an axe, but the spring ran year-round, so they had water. And they'd tramped around enough. There were nothing particular in the snow, but the gorp was all gone, completely gone. She said, well, I guess the little animals got it. That's great. And they kind of did some chores around the cabin that morning and had a little lunch. He said, do you want to go skiing again? She said, yeah. He said, there's another place that's really, really cool to go skiing this afternoon. It was a beautiful day. Beautiful bluebird day, not a cloud in the sky, blue sky. And so they started out, and they had to go to a different area of the forest a little bit further away, and there was a big open area where they were skiing, and as they went, two eyes were watching them from deep back in the trees. And the sun was glinting off the girl's hair, and it looked like her hair was on fire in the sun. And the two eyes were focused on that hair from way deep back in the trees. And they went on and found the open glade and started telemark skiing and had a wonderful afternoon. And right at the end of the afternoon, the father's last run, he climbed up with his skins, put his skins in his pack, and he said, I'm going to see if I can't go a little further than the end of this open area in the forest. I'm going to see if I can't go a little further and maybe find a way down to the cabin from here instead of having to go back around in a circle to get to the cabin. I might be able to find a direct way to the cabin. And so he didn't stop at the bottom of the open area, and he kind of skied through the trees. And the next thing she heard was sort of a crash and a shout. And she skied down, and he had skied into a ravine, into a big ravine, which is, a big steep-sided, where there was water in the bottom, there was a stream in the bottom, and a big steep cut. And there were big rocks in the bottom of it. And he hadn't seen it and skied off and fallen into it. And she skied up to the edge and looked over, and she said, Dad, are you okay? And he said, I think I broke my leg. She said, you got to be kidding. He said, no, I think I broke my leg. And I think you're going to have to help me get back to the cabin. And so she sidestepped down into the ravine, and sure enough, his leg he couldn't put any weight on it. It was really bad. So by her helping him, and they could slide on the skis, they managed, he could work on his good foot, on his good leg, and with her on the other side, they managed in about 2 hours to get back to the cabin. And she got him lying down in one of the bunks, and sure enough, his leg was broken. And so she boiled some water and got him something to drink and got him comfortable, and he said, you're going to have to go for help tomorrow. She said, are you kidding me? I'm not leaving you. You've got a broken leg. And he said, that we don't have a satellite phone. Cell phones don't work back in the wilderness. We told the rangers we wouldn't be back for another 4 or 5 days. That's too long. You're going to have to go for help. And she said, I can't leave you. And he said, look, you can leave. We can make a crutch out of a piece of tree that I can hobble around the cabin on. You can leave me firewood. We can pile up a lot of firewood by the stove. Leave the food with me. He said, it hurts like heck, but I can hobble around. I can keep the fire going. I can make myself some food. And it'll take you 2 days to get out. And they'll bring in snowmobiles or something and get me and rescue me, no problem. But you got to go, because you can't stay, because if you can't stay, nothing's going to happen. You got to go. And so she argued and argued, but he talked her into it. And she realized she needed to go. So it's 2 days. So the next morning, she gets up and gets breakfast and packs up her pack with a tent, her sleeping bag, and food for 2 days. And make sure that all the wood is collected. She's got plenty of water. She gathers plenty of water, so he's got plenty of water. He's set up as best as he can be. And he was a pretty good outdoorsman, so he wasn't worried about himself. She was very worried about him. So she sets out. And as she starts, it's a beautiful, again, another beautiful day. And from way, way back deep in the forest, there's a pair of eyes that watch that sun on her hair as she starts out. And she starts out and she stops at noon to have a sandwich, and clouds are starting to fill the sky. Clouds are blowing in and the wind's picking up. And so she keeps going, and by mid-afternoon, the wind is blowing like crazy and it's starting to snow. And she keeps going, and by late afternoon she gets to the ridge. She has to climb the ridge. And it's starting to get, the visibility is starting to get really, really bad. The snow is blowing. She's got goggles, she's got a hat, she's got plenty of clothes, but it's starting to get real hard to see. And she starts climbing the ridge, and the storm gets worse. And now she can't see hardly anything. The wind is blowing so hard, but she's not inexperienced in the backcountry. She's not inexperienced, and she knows she's got her skins on the skis, and she knows she's got to keep going up. She's got to keep going up. She can't go down. She knows she's got to keep going up to get to the top of the ridge. And she does. And she gets to the top of the ridge, and she's in trees and stuff. And as she's going up the ridge, the wind is howling. But she's almost certain that in the middle of the howling wind, she hears but she keeps going. She gets up to the top of the ridge, and she knows it's the top because it flattens. She's not going up anymore. She's going flat. So she knows she's there. And the wind is blowing like crazy. And she takes her pack off, gets close to some trees, takes her pack off, and pulls the tent out of the pack. The tent is in a sack itself. She puts the pack down, she unwraps the sack and pulls the tent out. And as she pulls the tent out, the wind catches it, and it blows up like a balloon, and it's blown out of her hands and blown away in the storm, gone. And she's not too worried because she has her sleeping bag. And she knows that she can burrow down in the sleeping bag and probably survive the night. And she turns to the pack on the ground and goes to the bottom of the pack, and the sleeping bag's gone. Somehow she hadn't tied it on tightly enough, and in the wind and the climbing, the sleeping bag fell off the pack. Now she knows she's in serious trouble. She doesn't have a sleeping bag. She doesn't have a tent. The only way to survive this storm is for her to stay active, stay moving, keep the blood circulating. She can't go on because it's too dark. I mean, she'll lose her way. She can't go on. And so what she does is she gets under a tree and she starts stomping around. She takes her skis off, she starts stomping around. She stomps around the tree. And she jumps up and down. And she moves her arms and her legs. And she does jumping jacks. She does everything she can. But we're only at 7 o'clock at night. And by 10 o'clock at night, she's in a bad way. She's eaten some food, but she's in a bad way because she's getting tired. And the cold and the wind doesn't stop. And the storm is going on. And so she's doing everything she can. She makes it to about midnight. She's got a watch. She makes it to about midnight, and she's getting real tired. And finally, at about 1 o'clock, she's sitting on the ground, and she's trying to move her arms, trying to keep going, but she's slowing down. Now, when you die from freezing to death, you die by going to sleep. That's the way you freeze to death. Everything, all of a sudden, you just go off. That's the way you die freezing to death. And she's 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, she's there. And she just says, oh, it's just much easier to just go to sleep. And she goes to sleep. Somewhere after that, she later remembers that she had a sensation of bouncing. And that's it. When she next opens her eyes, she's warm. That's the first thing she notices. The cold is gone. Second thing she notices is all she can see is little bits of light. Just little bits of light, not clear light. Light, but not clear, just little bits of light. And she moves, and there's this big rustling noise. And she moves her head, and there's a rustling noise, and stuff shakes away, and she finds that she's under a huge pile of leaves. And she pushes the leaves off, and she's in a deadfall. Now, what a deadfall is, if there's a big tree and it crashes, and the stump breaks off up the tree so it crashes, part of the tree is still attached to the stump, which is sticking up the air. The rest of the tree has fallen to the ground. And in that area, under the branches and everything, it's what's called a deadfall. And it can be pretty, you can actually have sort of like a little cave in there. The branches are all down on the side of the tree, but it's kind of protected in there. And that's what she's in. She's in a deadfall covered with leaves. And so she moves around, everything's fine. She sits up, and the light was through the leaves. She shakes the leaves off, and it's daylight. Sun's out. And she kind of works her way around and hears not close, out in the forest, in the trees somewhere around her. She stumbles out of the deadfall, and there's bright light over to this way, and open area. And she walks out into the open area through the snow, and she's 100 yards from the ranger station, and it's more or less about 10 o'clock in the morning. And so she makes her way to the ranger station, beats on the doors. The guys run out. She tells them what's happened. They take her in, get her some hot chocolate, and call for a helicopter to go get her dad, to fly in and get her dad. And all this commotion erupts around the ranger station, while they're getting everything organized. And the last thing they do is they said, "What do you want us to do?" And she said, "It's possible my mom might be back from the veterinarian conference in Chicago. Could you call a house in Durango?" And the ranger calls a house in Durango, and the mother answers. She's come back early from the conference. And he tells her what happened. He said, "Now your husband's okay. We got a helicopter going in. He's broken his leg. He seems to be fine. Your daughter came out. She's here with us. She's fine. Everything's okay. Would you come out and get her?" And he says, "And please bring a change of clothes for her, because she stinks to high heaven." And that is the end of the story.